Good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Fleming Castaldi, and it's my privilege this evening to present Therapy as Ed's online office hours, which we do every Tuesday from 7 to 8 Eastern Standard Time, during which we review must-know content that we know is on the NBCOT exam. Tonight, I'll be going over the top five things you should know, must know, according to the NBCOT exam content outlines for both the code exam and the OTR exam about universal design and ADA accessibility standards. At the end of that, I will also be available to answer any open-ended questions you may have about the NBCOT exam content, format, scoring, any questions that you may have. Okay. Before we begin, I just need to do a few logistics. If you could please make sure that you don't audio record this, video record, or take pictures or screenshots. And particularly, it is really against copyright laws to do that. But most important, it is significantly against copyright laws and our professions code of ethics if you post that publicly on social media, and as something such as Quizlet. Quizlet can be a handy thing for making your own study cards, but once you post copyrighted information on Quizlet or any other public medium, it is a violation of copyright law and our professional code of ethics. So I thank you for adhering to those standards. Okay. I have muted everybody during the session, but please, when I do ask if people have questions, or if you do need a clarification, because maybe I said something too quickly or I used a term that you didn't understand, please do unmute yourself and ask your question, okay? If you are able to leave your video on, it's kind of nice to see faces rather than boxes, but I understand this is a busy time of evening. As I mentioned, this session will be recorded and posted in 2 weeks on Therapy Ed YouTube channel. It will be available for at least 1 month, and only the PowerPoint is posted, not the chat box. To ask questions, please do use the check box, and I will scan through it. But as I mentioned before I started recording, I will hold off on answering questions to make sure that we get through the formal presentation before people have to leave for the evening. Also, if you could scan through to make sure you are asking diverse questions so we have time for more different questions. All right. So why are we focusing on this tonight? Basically, we're focusing on universal design and AD accessibility because both the CODA exam content outline and the OTR exam content outline specifically state that the task of implementing environmental modifications while considering accessibility guidelines and standards and legislation to support participation in occupation consistent with client needs and status, task demands, and context is required for competent practice. And as you see, they're saying the same thing, both for the OTR exam and the CODA exam, because it's a requirement of all OT practitioners. So therefore, the information that is provided in Chapter 15 in the OTA Review and Study Guide and in Chapter 16 in the OT Review and Study Guide will help you answer NBCOT exam questions related to environmental modifications. On the CODA exam, they're Domain 2 exams, and on the OTR exam, they're Domain 3 exams. If you wanted more information about the NBCOT exam content outline, I have extensive information in the review and study guide in Chapter 1, both the OT and OTA. And also we have that in our course manual when we discuss that in the course. And you could go to go to www.nbcot.org and click on exam and click on what's on the exam, and you go directly to the content outline. And that is where I received this information from those sources, which I'm quoting here and citing. Okay, so if you have the 9th edition of the OT, this begins on page 457. If you want to read, if you want to go along with the slides that I'm presenting. If you have the 10th edition, it begins on page 541. If you have the OTA 4th edition, it begins on page 407, and the 5th edition begins on page 502. Okay, so legislation. Chapter 4 in both review and study guides gives extensive information about all legislation related to occupational therapy, including information about Medicare, because Medicare was founded based upon a law, and you need to know your Medicare. But I do revisit key legislation in chapter 15 in the OTA and chapter 16 in the OT review and study guide to just highlight how much that does relate to environmental accessibility and to that standard about known legislation. Of course, the number one standard legislation is the ADA, which was passed in 1990, and that mandated full participation. And part of that mandate of the ADA included several sections that talked about accessible environments for persons with disabilities, that any kind of building that dealt with public service, employment, transportation, public accommodations had to be accessible. So that's where, and when we go through some of the key accessibility guidelines, those are a direct result of ADA mandates. OPRA is another important legislation related to environmental accessibility, and that's about restraint reduction. Now, we're not going to go over restraint reduction this evening because we're talking about ADA accessibility as far as environmental accessibility. But I wanted to just include this and mention that it's both in chapter 15 and chapter 16, because restraint reduction, when people are restrained, they cannot participate in their environment. So to enable people to participate in the environment, there are specific rules as to when restraints are allowed. Okay, including medically necessary to prevent harm. And in both chapters, I cover quite a bit on restraint reduction and alternatives to restraints. So I just wanted to let you know that that information is also in these chapters. IDA is another very important legislation that mandated that children with disabilities should receive education in the least restrictive and most natural environment. I cover more about IDA when I talk about practice settings, and I talk about school-based settings when I do that online office hours. But I wanted to again emphasize that that will be a piece of legislation that will be tested on the exam in relationship to participation in education and the social environment of school, including playgrounds, cafeterias, etc. Another, and there's a couple other laws. At number 4, there was another education law, but to save space, I didn't include that here. But do know that is in the chapter and also in chapter 4. A very important law was actually passed in 1998 called the Fair Housing Amendment Act that required that all multifamily dwellings with an elevator and all ground floor units of buildings without an elevator must meet these 7 requirements. So you could, on the exam, have that you are an OT practitioner consulting with someone who's building multifamily housing or consulting with a town or a city council as to how to make buildings accessible. That is a very valid role for both CODIS and OTRs. So the key things that you would be looking at if, say, that was an exam item would be, is the building entrance accessible on an accessible route? Is there common areas and public areas that are accessible? Things like the laundromat, things like the mailroom. Are those accessible? Are there the doors wide enough for people with wheelchairs? Are there accessible routes into and throughout the dwelling unit? So, from the parking lot, from the laundry room again. And then all the light switches, electrical outlets, thermostats, and all controlled in accessible locations. Accessible locations are not things that are very high or very low. And I'll have the picture of the wheelchair on how high a person from a wheelchair can reach, and particularly how low they can reach, which is a big issue for plugging in things. Many plugs in many homes are too low to be safely reached from a wheelchair without running the risk of tipping it. So in any building that's multifamily or ground floor without elevators, have to have then that the outlets would be raised for the person to be able to. And I'll give you the dimensions of that when I show the picture of wheelchair reach. Also reinforced walls and bathrooms style installation of grab bars. You have to have where a grab bar is not like a towel rack just put into plasterboard or just into tile, because when someone puts weight on that, it will collapse. So they have to have reinforced walls, and they have to have kitchen and bathrooms that allow a wheelchair to maneuver in space. And I'll show pictures on how much room is allowed to maneuver and the dimensions of that. Okay. Okay, that's a good quick question, Elizabeth. Multifamily dwelling, 4 units or more. To be honest, I don't think this is, I'm not sure there's federal mandated about that. I would have to look that up. But as you know, sometimes federal laws are superseded by state laws and local laws. So I don't think the MBCOT will be specific about saying a four apartment building versus a six apartment building as multifamily. I think they'll use the generic term of multifamily. Okay, because there's too much variations in state and local laws. Okay. Um, Bilateral handrails on a ramp. I will get to the ADA in a minute. Um, and I'll cover ramps in a couple minutes, okay? I have some slides about ramps. So again, if you could hold off on the questions that relate to possible content, I'll be moving that I'll be covering. That would be helpful so we get through for people who have to leave. But if you have something that needs clarification, like that one about multifamily, I'm more than happy to answer those. And again, all these laws and other laws are expanded upon in chapter 4, and I give the page numbers for both editions of the book, the fourth and fifth. This information is in both books. Okay. The role of the OT practitioner is critical. And because that's what you're going to be tested on the MBCOT exam, right? What is the role of the OT practitioner? So both CODIS and OTRs, which is why I specifically say OT practitioner, you need to be familiar with all aspects of the person's living environment, their living, their vocational, leisure, and whether service delivery takes place in a hospital, nursing home, school, or home environment. So that is a requirement that we're aware of the multiple contexts of individuals, which guys know from studying and learning. Most curriculums use the practice framework. The MBCOT exam does not only use the practice framework for constructing items, but it is one of the frameworks they use. And they do recognize that most schools use that to guide their teaching. So as you know, we take a multi-contextual approach to people when we do the occupational profile. Now we can provide direct service to enable environmental mastery. So direct service is teaching people wheelchair mobility, that's another session that we cover when we do wheelchairs and wheelchair mobility. But it can also be direct services. There are a number of public transportation systems that hire occupational therapists and other professionals to help people who have, say, autism spectrum disorder or other disabilities learn to master public transportation. I particularly know the Philadelphia public transportation hires OTs to do that. So you can provide those direct services of bringing people right to the public transportation and learning how to manage it, whether they have a sensory processing disorder or mobility impairment or some other disability. Okay. We can also, though, besides providing direct services, we can serve as advocates to do compliance. Okay. And being an advocate is also something that is recognized by the MBCOT exam. And we can advocate for designing things that meet universal designs principles and use universal designs. And I'll show a picture of this table in a minute. Okay. The other thing, so when the book goes through then all these contexts, okay, the book does go through all the different contexts in detail in the chapters. So I'm not going to go over all of them due to space tonight, but just to in both books, the CODA and OTR, in all the chapters, we have exam hints. And in those exam hints, besides saying how it relates to the exact content on the exam, the content outline, we explain how this information may play out in an exam item. So for example, the information we have about the different environmental considerations in chapter 15 and 16 could be about an OT practitioner planning discharge with an older adult and their family caregivers. And in that planning of discharge, you would consider the person's multiple contexts, such as their architectural barriers, which are physical, sensory, the lighting in the home if someone has low vision, social, do they have an available social network or are they socially isolated? And cultural, what are the norms related to care of a family member, an older family member, and their participation? Because different cultures have different norms. And then personal, the socioeconomic status. Can they pay for services and equipment? Or are they relying on Medicare for that? As many of you may know or may not know, and that's a separate session that we also do on insurance and reimbursement and then the healthcare system. But just to review, Medicare does not pay for grab bars and Medicare does not pay for raised toilet seats. So we have to know the alternative of using a 3-in-1 commode. Medicare will not pay for those. So that's maybe a consideration in a exam item about what does the OT recommend to enable participation in the person's environment if they only have Medicare, and what are options. For example, you can maybe have an option that they would get support from a center from independent living. Okay. And then temporal, what is the routine of the family? So it could be how you're going to integrate certain things into routine. And then virtual, access to assistive technology. Does someone need to have an automatic door opener? Does someone need to have an environmental control unit? Now, I'm not going to cover environmental control units tonight or assistive technology devices, but both chapter 15 in the OTA and chapter 16 in the OT review and study guide cover assistive technology and environmental control units, which has their own requirement in the content outline, as that knowledge of that is required for competent practice. I may have a mistake down there. This should be OT 5th edition, should be 9th edition there, where it says 4th edition. I apologize. Okay, the other thing the MECOT states is that for the OTR, and just for space, I didn't put the CODA one up, but the CODA has the same requirement in the 22 content outline. So basically, the CODA and the OTR exam content outline itemized tests collaborating with other professionals as critical for entry-level practice, and that you need to know the roles and responsibilities among the team members when coordinating care and providing services. So you do need to know about the different team members, and these are the team members that are identified in the chapters on environment. Okay. And that will help you answer domain 1 in the domain 2 in the OTR exam, and domain 1 in the CODA exam. Okay. And in these chapters, I describe each of the person. So say you do have someone that now has, because they're low vision, needs to have a certified orientation mobility specialist. It could have the OT working with someone because the person now has lost vision. Okay. If it is about environmental control units, it will be an assistive technology professional. Okay. It could be a certified rehab and technology supplier you're working with. In these chapters, we also cover driver rehab. So that's also in there. Rehab engineer. If communications board would be speech language pathologist. And then, of course, because we have to get things paid for, one of the members of the team is our third-party payers and their case managers. So throughout the chapter, in each section, I talk about the different people that you would be working with. Okay, universal design is key. And the MECOT exam specifically states that you need to know principles of universal design. So these are the principles, and table 16.1 in the OT review and study guide and 15.1 in the OTA. And this is a summary of the principles. So things that are universally designed can be used equitably by all people. This is a bathroom sink I took of a picture in, I think it was either Charleston, South Carolina, or Savannah, Georgia. It was one airport when I was going down south to visit some family. And this is universal design. You could have a wheelchair pull up here. You can have someone stand here. You can have kids come up here. And it's just everyone of all different heights can use it. Okay. And it's a great example of an accommodation. Also, things that can be lowered. Okay. That raised or lowered to accommodate people of varying heights. Levered doorknobs, I'll have a picture of things that are flexible in their use, like a caption webinar. I know I personally greatly enjoy when webinars are captioned because it's sometimes things, except sometimes the spelling is weird. But if you're distracted or the person's not speaking, you're not you're distracted from the thing, you can read along if you're not able to watch it. And things that are simple, like intuitive websites, things that are well organized, effective prompts, descriptive names for hyperlinks. Okay, and I know the one thing that's very nice about the new MECOT website, it's extremely intuitive. So it really, they've done a lot of good work on making it universal design. This was, I had the privilege of going to Versailles a few years ago, and clearly not everything is universally designed because this is 201 for if you're listening to something, and it's number 1 on the iPad if you're having signing. But they did have about 25, 30 of key areas that they had someone signing on an iPad to give a description. So they were making an effort. And some of these, some of them were like about small little things that you didn't even listen to, but they are making an effort that they do have iPads that people can listen to signing. which I thought was pretty cool. Okay. Principles of universal design. Again, this is not universal design. This is universal design. This is universal design. Okay. Things that communicate key information effectively, regardless of user's ability. Things that allow for errors and minimize habits, like office hallways that are free of protruding objects at a height. Because people with a cane, it's really interesting. You may not have, you guys, some of you may be too young to know this, but in my schools, when I was in school, your water fountain protruded out from the wall. Okay. They protruded out from the wall. So, but someone were walking with a cane, the cane goes under that. So they would slam into it. Okay. They would not know it's there because the cane is underneath it. So if you notice, all new buildings have that water fountains are in back away from the wall. You have the wall and then you have the enclosure where the water fountains and the water stations are. They're not protruding. That's because of the ADA. Okay. That universal design to make it safe for people. It's a subtle thing that people don't notice, but when it wasn't there and people were hitting into it, it was a definite problem. Anyone with low vision or someone who used a cane. So that was a good change with universal design. Things that can be used efficiently, low physical effort, are touch activated faucets. When you can hit with your elbow, you can hit with your chin if you have to. Okay. Those things don't require functional grasp. Automatic door openers. It's interesting. I was just at New England, New York Institute of Technology to do a course this weekend, and their automatic doors, instead of requiring you to hit them, to slam them and slap them hard, they had where you just had a wave, and they open for a wave, which requires less force. So I thought that was really cool when I saw that. And a space and size for all persons. I think if you noticed that we now have a lot of waiting rooms, we have things that have wider seats for people who would need a wider seat. Adequate space between so that someone with a wheelchair can maneuver. Okay. Food displays that can be seen from a seated or sitting position. Now, sometimes the food display doesn't have to be underneath. You may have seen this where they have mirrors to show someone who's sitting what is being displayed. Kind of like you have the mirrors outside your driveway if you don't have good vision to let you know what's there. You could have tilted mirrors to then see, but so that someone could see it for either sitting or standing. Okay, and this is the table that's in both of the books. It's 15.1 in the OTA review and study guide and 16.1. And basically, that's where I pulled this information from. So I just want to show you that, you don't need to take notes. Everything I am talking about is directly from the review and study guide chapter. I am a big fan because my brother was a wheelchair user and he had Friedreich's ataxia. And he was born pre-ADA, pre-IDA, pre-everything, where I was born in 57, he was born in 54. So ADA was not passed till 1990. The Education of Handicapped Children Act was passed in 73. He'd already graduated high school. So he grew up in a very disabling world. So I'm very in tune to when things have become enabling. And I had the privilege of presenting at a conference in Croatia a couple of years ago. They had this wonderful national park where through the entire park were boardwalks. Said people with wheelchairs and people with strollers could go through the entire park. It was absolutely fantastic and beautiful. And this was the Glacier National Park. Now, Glacier, there's a lot of very steep things, so you don't have wheelchair access, but there's a lovely section that is wheelchair accessible. And they have many picnic tables that right here, someone can pull up with a wheelchair. So making it accessible. Because if you think of traditional wheelchair picnic tables that are cut off here, okay, you can't access via wheelchair. It's not accessible, okay, because you have the bars here. So there's no place that you can go under with your wheelchair on traditional picnic tables. So this is a fantastic example of universal design. Someone can roll up this way, they can roll up this way, and you could actually have two people roll up. So, and they're throughout Glacier National Park, which is very, very cool. All right. Each week we do an exam item of the week that relates to the topic. And I apologize because this week's exam item week, for those of you who follow it on social media, it's had the reflex one. And last week when Tony presented reflexes had this one. There was a miscommunication about how the shift in timing, which in this age, everybody's so busy, it's understandable. So I'm going to ask you guys to look at this, and this would be an example of an exam item that you might see something like this on your exam. So restaurant owner hires an OT practitioner to consult on the redesign of the building's restroom to more effectively meet the needs of customers who use wheelchairs for mobility. So basically, he wants to apply universal design and ADA. Which dimension are best to recommend for the open floor space so customers can turn their wheelchair when inside the restroom with ease? Okay, not doing, like when you do sorry, guys, did not mean to do that. Not having to do a 6-point turn, like when you make a U-turn with your car, being able to do a complete turn without having to do a 6-point turn. So what do people think? Which is the correct answer? Okay. Kevin, you are correct, along with your peers. What led you to say D? You are correct.
It's because what I remember is 5x5 for a landing space, so 5 times 12, 60 inch.
Exactly. And knowing those fundamentals, 5x5 is needed for the clearing space, is going to get you the right answer. Chapter 16 is a chapter that really uses a lot of procedural reasoning. So even though you have to memorize these things, okay, and I'll have a picture of this in a few minutes, the 5x5, okay, what slope it is. But once you have that memorized and can multiply it by 12, you're going to get the right answer because NBCOT exam follows the protocols. Okay. They follow what are the rules of the game. Okay. What are the rules for accessibility? So once you know those accessibility standards, you're going to get right answers. You're going to get correct answers. And basically, you just have to go 1, 2, it's a 3-point term, not a 6-point term. Okay. And there's a picture of that in the book. I thought I may have the picture of the circumference, but it is in the chapters. I may have in a subsequent slide, but it shows you the turning radius. The other thing, I have multiple pictures that we got permission from. It was a public domain and a government site. So here, to clear a doorway, how much do you need is always the question. A minimum of 32 is needed. Okay, so you need a minimum of 32. That's the minimum. But 36 is desirable. And the hallway should be minimum so that sufficient clearance so that you compel, because going through a doorway like 32, you're going to do one little push while your arms are out in the hallway. So you do a push through the doorway. But if you're pushing through, just go on your chair and do it. Your elbows are protruding. So to be able to safely go down the hallway has to be wider. Okay. So when you get to the door, you can kind of give a good push through. But to go into the hallway should be 36 wide. Okay. To make it movable for you. Now, an important thing to know is when you open a door, okay, doorway sometimes 32 inches. You may have that a person lives in a place and the hallway is 32 inches and it can't be extended, out because of it's not required. Because if it's a single family home, it's not required. Or if it's a religious institution, it's not required. So say someone works for a church congregation. Okay. And these are the page numbers in the book if you want to see them in the book. So one way to make this a little wider is you can remove a doorstop. And the doorstop is that piece of wood that keeps the door from slamming. This is a doorstop here. See how it sticks out? That keeps the door from slamming. You remove that, you gain 3/4 of an inch. And then you can also replace existing hinges. See how this hinge goes like this? Because when you open a door, the door is still partially blocking, right? The door is like here. It's open, but it's against this. This swings the door out and away against the wall. So you gain another 1/2 inch, 1.5 inch, 2 inch, depending on how thick the door is. So you gain the width of the door. So you can, if you say you get a 6-option multiple choice on a code exam, or you get a 6-option item in a scenario set on the OTR exam, where you have to pick 3 things, 3 out of 6 as the correct answer. And it's like, how can you make a door more accessible? 2 of the correct answers could be adding offset hinges, and it could be removing a doorstop. Okay. If it also is about making the door accessible so it doesn't slam on the person, because the person lives independently. You know how when you open a door and then a minute goes, it starts to, if it's a heavy door, it can slam on you. This is what's called a door closer. You've probably seen them if they're often in commercial buildings, but sometimes people put them in their homes. My brother did. He had one in his apartment. He had an automatic door opener and then a door and then an automatic door closure. But these also don't have to be electronic. These are I don't know how to describe how they work, but basically they don't require any electricity. But they're the thing that allows the door to close slowly instead of slamming. I forget the exact amount of time, but it's like 10 or 15 seconds that it takes to close. So that can enable access. So be aware that some of these accommodations, like offset hinges, door closers, even door stops, can actually enable someone who has a narrow doorway to get, instead of maybe not to 36, but to get to a 34-inch clearance for themselves. That could be very helpful. Okay. The other thing to know is on the latch side of the door. So you know where a door latches, you need 18 inches so that the person can, when they swing, because you got to open the door, so your wheelchair's got to go back, and you need at least 60 inches of depth to basically clear. It's hard to describe this via Zoom, and one day I'll have to do a video. But if you ever open a door in your house, maybe with a rolling chair, if you don't have a wheelchair, you can see why that's important, because you have to back up with the chair as the door opens or move forward. Okay. Okay. As I mentioned, the Fair Housing Act had that electrical outlets had to be accessible to persons with disabilities, and light switches had to be accessible. And this is why my side reach and my forward reach, I cannot reach lower than 15 inches from the floor. If I do, the likelihood is my center of gravity in the wheelchair as I'm going forward to lean below 15 inches is going to tip the chair, okay, which is dangerous. Same as if I reach too high, then I'm going to have to be extending over, and that can tip the chair. Okay. So these are important safety considerations. Now, most houses now are built standard where they meet these criteria, but you could have older homes that aren't, okay, where they're very close to the baseboard. Okay. I'm actually looking at mine, and I think my top outlet probably meets the 15 inches, but I'm not so sure the bottom one does, to be honest. I think it looks more like 12. So, and these are, again, basic rules that you need to know. The maximum height forward is 48 inches. So, and this is the guy in a wheelchair showing. This is a really well-designed kitchen. And the lowest height is 15. From the side, because you're not leaning as much forward, you can go an inch, you have also 48. Okay, so it's 48 and 15. Okay. Instruction, but without instruction. See, this is an obstruction. If there's no obstruction, so there's they're doing a counter here. Well, that says 46. They're not actually consistent in this picture, is there? Are they? But the side is 54 if there's no obstruction, if it's just reading up for a light switch. But there is a countertop, which is what this guy is going for. That it says 48 here, but in this it says 46, which doesn't make sense. So let me explain one thing about the NBCOT exam. If there's inconsistency in resources, they will go for one that's inclusive. So it would likely be 46 because 48 includes 46, whereas 48 doesn't include, 46. And I have to check out the ICC because the last time I looked, it was the same. But again, no 15 inches too low and not too high up, okay, because it will tilt. Countertop should be maximum 36. The ideal is going for a certain height. And again, 48, 15, maximum height 54. Okay, ramps. Question came up about ramps. Ramp railing should be between 34 and 38 according to ADA. So just know that range. So it shouldn't be like 32 because again, too low, or 40. You need to have curb protectors. and prevent of either wheelchair caster, walker, or crutch tips from going off. So see, this ramp is a terrible ramp, clearly, because it's way too steep. It should be a 1 to 12 slope, okay? But it does have a good picture of the lip. So it's way too steep, but there is the lip there. If a ramp is long, okay, now excessively long is subject to interpretation. Because excessively long, if someone has limited upper extremity strength or decreased pulmonary capacity, they may not be able to go as long as someone does for a who does not have that. But you have to have that 5 by 5, what was said before, that's the turning radius. So what is excessively long? I'm looking at a room that I'm in now, and it's about 20 feet long. A 20-foot long ramp is a long ramp going up. So I would say this would have to be broken up. Okay. If there's a sharp turn, you also need turn for turning, and I'll have pictures in a minute. So 90 degrees, 5 by 5, 180 degree is 4 by 8, and I will have pictures of this. A grocery store aisle, Margie, answer your question, because that's a good one, and it's on what you mean how wide aisles should be in a grocery store? Okay, I'm assuming you mean how wide aisles should be in a grocery store. Aisles in a grocery store have a whole nother set of requirements also beyond the 36 of an aisle in like an apartment building. 36 is the minimum for wheelchair, but most jurisdictions will have fire safety things and also that people have to pass each other. So it would need to enable passage. Now, supermarket grocery aisles are very wide because they have the carts. If you go into something like CVS, they're wider than the 30, sometimes wider than 36, but probably not much wider, depending on a small private pharmacy or a small private store. The 36 would be the minimum because it allows for access and people just have to back up or back in if it's crowded type of thing. So that is the mandate. But when you get into larger things, you get more into the issue of fire safety and things like that. Now, there's a whole nother, to be honest, set of ADA regulations for hotels and restaurants and stores, like really in depth. The ADA book is this big. But because that gets into a lot of detail, we did not include it in the book because I have my doubts NBCOT will ask for that level of specialization. Okay, so I think if you go by 36-inch wide is a good amount. And then if you're looking at, making it accessible that people could go by, you're looking more at 42, 54. But that would be recommendations. They'll ask you what is the minimum. Okay. Of course, you can always do better. Same as with doors, minimum is 32, but 34 and 36 is much better. Okay. Oops, excuse me. That went by too fast. When I go into the chat box, sometimes it winds up moving me ahead much quicker. All right. So here are some good examples of ramps. This is a 90-degree turn. Okay, so that's what 90-degree turn is. So here you have that it is the 180, the 5 by 5. This is, it's 90 degree. Okay. I don't have a picture of this you can't see, but I think it did have this is a 180, but I couldn't fit the picture in because I wanted to show you this thing about door swing. This is a good picture of door swing. How here the door, see how it opens? And this is the space you need. You need this room on the side. Okay. You need at least 18 inches so the person can line up the wheelchair because if it's just here, they're going to be hitting the wheelchair. So this is what door swing means, how it swings to the side. Okay. And this is when they say, ramp. So this is probably a good length to see where how it needs to switch. And this is a ramp that has a lot of switchbacks. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, stair lifts, internal and external stair lifts, external, internal, are alternatives to ramps. Inside a house, if you have your bedrooms on your second floor and you really love your house and you don't want to move, this is an option for someone. Same as out here. This is important for historical buildings. You may have a question about you're working with someone who has a historical building, but they want to make it more accessible. Having an external lift can be one way to do it. That's also religious organizations and religious congregations are not, and religious things like a JCC or Christian type of group, Jewish type of group, any type of religious organization that has like a community center, they're not bound by ADA as a religious group, nor are Native American Indian tribes. So you could have that someone's asking you to make the building more accessible, and this could be an option. These also portable ramps can be very much an option. Like that picture here, this is a picture of someone, I he'd have to be very strong, someone very strong upper extremity to do this on his own without flipping. That would not be safe. This is not a safe thing if someone's very, very strong. But if this is the only way to get into a place and you have someone who is able to, has the strength to push the person up, that may be the only alternative for a person, particularly if it's a historic building or a private home and they don't have the funds. So portable ramps are good, but that one is definitely not ideal. What this should be done is they should have the ramp that actually went out the door. So if you ever have that, in practice or exam, it should not be this shorter ramp. The ramp should go extend out the door. You see how my cursor is doing it? So it should be wide enough, the door should be wide enough, clearly it's wide enough for the wheelchair to get through. So you could put the ramp that it is extending outside the door. So it should still be the 1x12. This is a poor design, because you can get foldable ramps that fold up. And like this next one. This is one that's purposely made for patio doors. Okay, but they make other portable ramps that can be for multiple stairs. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is parking. Okay, oops, excuse me, is accessibility for parking, because that's an important thing. Parking spaces should all have an adjacent 5-inch aisle like this, 5 feet. I'm sorry, 5 feet. A van needs to have 8 feet, because see, this person had no choice to park, and with the van, when you have a lift, and now I am stuck because here's the lip and I can't go over it. Particularly I have an electronic wheelchair. Like electric wheelchairs are very, very heavy. Okay, this is my favorite sign. This is a hiking trail I often do up to a beautiful waterfall in the Catskill Mountains called Catskill Falls. And they redid the access to the falls to make it more accessible and safer, because it was dangerous. A lot of people were getting hurt. So he made it much more accessible. And I love that's a very active wheelchair, same as this one. And this is hard pack. So someone can use a wheelchair to go on that trail. So it's quite nice. But you need the van spaces and you need the space to be able to enter into your car. Okay. And the 8 feet is what's needed. So 5 + 3 is 8 feet next to a van is what's the requirement. All right. That's my brief summary, some key points. I wanted to show some figures and pictures and tables from the book so you knew what was available in both editions of the book for the Coder and OTR. And if there's any other questions, let me see in the chat box, and then I will move on to the other questions about general things. Let me see.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
You had mentioned something about like the 5 x 5, so we can know, how much room they have to do a turn. But then you mentioned something about a 3-point versus a 4-point or 2-point.
Oh yeah, I was just using the thing of when if you have to make a U-turn with your car, and
Yeah.
sometimes like it's a narrow street and you got to keep inching back forward before you
Yeah.
can make the turn. So if someone doesn't have that 5x5, they can't do the back turn and then do it. They have to do multiple, just like you do with a car, basically. That's what I meant.
Okay. I thought that was something of like, know your math if you had to do a 3-point or
Oh,
not.
no. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. Any tips for memorizing the numbers? The best thing that I think that works for me is get to know your body and act it out. Like know how long, like from shoulder to hand for most people, except with very long arms, is like 36 inches. So get an idea of what 36 inches looks like and 32 inches looks like and what 54, like in your own home. Because then it helps it make it real, like what's accessible, what's not accessible. And to be honest, it's just is learn the big ones, the ones that are figures in the book. Know those, the 5x4 turning radius, because those are the ones that are published by the government. And those are the standards that are going to be most common. Like that's what I said about like the grocery store versus, a small family run store. There's literally binders of of requirements for like hotels and things that NBCRT won't get into because that's at a real level of detail that even experts have to go and read the data. So I would memorize the ones that are emphasized in the book, to be honest, and get that sense of like, that's why I wanted that picture of the door swing. Why do you need space with the door? Then it'll become logical, roll up with a rolly chair or just a chair and see what it feels like and get a sense of space. I'm a very kinesthetic learner, so I find doing that helpful for me. The other thing, if you're an auditory learner, I mentioned this at both of the courses I did. Did one Seton Hall last week and NEIT, and I mentioned it this week. I mentioned in all my courses. If you're an auditory learner, make your own podcast. Take the numbers in the book and record them. Okay. And then when you're cutting vegetables for dinner, you're on a recumbent bike, you're walking your dog, you're stuck in traffic, listen to them. If you learn things auditorially, that if reading from a book doesn't work from you, make your own podcast. Okay. It works. The other thing is if you're a kinesthetic learner, like I am, besides acting it out, I find making my own note cards, the key points, by writing it out, I learn. If you are a person who always did group studying or studying with a partner, do Zoom meetings, do a study group, do a study partner thing and make it a Jeopardy game. Make it fun. And what's the new version of Jeopardy? I remember my Student OT Association used to do something, and it was a kind of fun way, but it was like Jeopardy, but a little different. And I know you can access it free online to set up those kind of games. So that would be my hint. Okay. Use the things that worked with you to memorize the hard stuff in your program. I always like to emphasize the point that when you are ready to take your exam, you're an exam candidate. You're no longer a student. And to become an exam candidate, you had to pass very rigorous coursework and fieldwork. So to pass that rigorous coursework field, and not even pass, you had to keep a B- to stay in your program, right? And a B- is a very good grade on the NBCOT exam. So you have those capabilities. It may not be your comfort zone, most people don't like to memorize, but you have done it in the past. So I would say use those skills you used in the past to memorize. So make your own little cheat sheet cards, not cheat sheet, make your own, cards to memorize from, because as you're doing that, you're learning, record it, or have, do study group and make Jeopardy games out of it. Do what worked for you in the past. Standards automatic door with size and placement. Clients with strong tenure spasticity, typical waist level, long and kick it with it. Yeah, unfortunately, things that are very specific to clients, well, unfortunately, things that are specific to clients sometimes are not covered by ADA. The whole thing about, where the standard placement of a grab bar is does not work for a lot of people. Okay. I'm very much, and just the standard, the one that's on the side and the one behind, that the one behind is not reachable to anybody who has short arms. It's not happening. Okay. So I'm a big advocate for having the extra one that goes down off the wall. Okay. So the standard ADA guidelines of this kind of L shape, the bar behind the toilet bar here does not work for many, many people. It does. I saw someone smiling that, yeah, it doesn't work for me. So that's the unfortunate part, okay, about that and that's where advocacy comes in, that, we have the need to advocate. So if that is a place that the person frequents often, work, school, apartment building, that's where maybe, can we change the location of this? Because it's not accessible. So yeah, it's, can kick at it, they can kick it or hit it. Yeah, I understand. That won't be on the exam, but it is definitely an issue in real life. There are many times I go to bathroom places that are accessible and I could tell right away they're not. Okay. Um, all right. Are the bars placed at the end or the bars are placed that they end up hitting their heads or the toilet paper? Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, Jennifer, I like your comment. All right. Kahoot. Yes, that was it, Jennifer. Thank you. Yeah, Kahoot. All right. I'm going to move on. Guess I'm not gonna show. And I'm just gonna give a few things about, in case people leave about therapy ed resources that you may not be aware of. And then I will answer the additional questions about the MBCOT exam. The most important thing to remember about preparing for the exam, there are two aspects. One is the content being a target study plan. So doing the memorizing, doing the reviewing, mastering the content knowledge you need. That's key. That's where the review and study guide is very handy, and study groups and all those things I just talked about. However, picking that correct answer can be a challenge. Knowing how to pick the best one out of 3 or 4 or the best 3 out of 6 can be a challenge. And I'm very proud that Therapy Ed's course has been doing that since 1998. So 25 years Therapy Ed course has been running. We have over 160 courses throughout the country. And there are some courses I've been going to. I started teaching for Therapy Ed in 2000. So I've been going to some places for my 24th year and my 20th year. So they're very successful because they're very interactive. You learn by doing. They are on campus, and since COVID, we did them online, and we've continued to do online courses. So they're available in those two formats. When you get the review and study guide, I need to update it. You now get the 10th edition of the book and the 5th edition of the book. So you do get the current book. And the motto is you have the book you study, take the class to learn how to do an effective exam preparation plan. And then you learn the strategies for selecting the correct answers, and you pass. Okay. The review and study guides are very efficient. We have synthesized all the content knowledge that will be tested on the MBCOT exam, so that simplifies your preparation. You don't have to go to multiple resources. And it is organized according to those exam hints. So you really know what is on the exam and what you need to study. They are also economical. It's expensive to buy a lot of products. Okay, it really is that you can spend a lot of money. When you get the review and study guide, you're getting all you need to know to pass the exam in one spot. There's content specific questions at the end of each chapter to assess your knowledge of that chapter information, help you jumpstart your studying. We include a lot of information about test taking and time management strategies to help you. And there is a portal that provides you access to 3 online practice exams. No longer though the content specific questions. I apologize. I needed to update that. So, I apologize. I'm going to go past it because those are slides from the 4th and 9th edition. They are courses that, again, we teach you strategies for breaking down the questions. Okay. It does include the new review and study guide and the course manual. Therapy Ed does allow free retakes of their courses if your exam is delayed. The other thing, my advice is do not buy the book from Amazon. Someone buys our books and then inflates the prices. The cheapest way to get the book is through Therapy Ed. And if you do bulk orders like through your bookstore or your program, you get a discount. Okay, online office hours, what we just did tonight. And any number of people up to 500 people can attend. And we do a top 5 must know. And then we will have our review session. There is tutoring offered by Therapy Ed. It is fee-based and it's very individualized. These are the topics that we cover in our 26-week cycle. So as you could see, I just did this, Tony did this last week. The exact schedule changes due to instructor availability, but these are the topics we cover. And then, as I mentioned, they are recorded. The exam prep resources are available. And we have the exam item of the week. I found this online office hours helpful. Please put it on Facebook and or social media. And I apologize. I apparently put up my old slides. Okay. So I don't have the slide about the app, but you can go online and find out information about the app on TherapeEd's website. Basically, the app is a supplement to our review and study guide. When you get the portal, you get access to 3 full exams, and then you get also access to a learning assistant, and you have access for that for a full year. And you are able to take the exams one time, but then you get a very detailed score report that tells you how you did in content areas, in domains of the MBCOT exam, critical reasoning, and you just click on the item because it'll tell you what you got right or wrong. You click on it, it will immediately go to page online that will tell you why the answer is right, why the other answers are incorrect. It will type the type of critical reasoning used, and then it will have an on AI learning assistant where it will have frequently asked questions. So for example, there's a question about a person with scleroderma, and you get it right, you get it wrong, but you don't really know a lot about scleroderma. So we'll say, like, what causes scleroderma? Can scleroderma be prevented? So frequently asked question. And you could write your own question and it will answer that. And it pulls from reputable textbooks to give you the answers to the question that you pose. And that access to all the rationales for the exam items and all the learning assistant is available for 1 year. The app has original questions, and the app also pulls from the questions from the book. So if you want to say, I'm still a little weak in information about environmental mastery, you can say to the app, I want to pull all category C8, because those are category C8 according to our book. And then it will pull those questions so you can retest your knowledge on that. Okay. So it's handy, and a lot of people like it, on the go type of thing. And so that's, if you have any other questions about the app, I can answer them. The question about the YouTube channel, basically the easiest way to find it is I just go into Google and Google TherapeEd YouTube. That's the quickest way I get to it, to be honest. And you just do that and then you'll right to it. And now do be aware that TherapeEd YouTube has OT, PT, and speech. So you just scroll down and it'll say playlist. So you just say, it says OT office hours, full playlist. And then you can see the full playlist of all the ones recorded. And if you scroll down the page a little bit, you can see the other webinars that I've done for, like, I did one for the Tennessee OT Association conference recently. I did one for the New York State OT Student Conclave a couple years ago. I did some for Inspire. So you can go and review those also. Now, I know there was another question about how is the exam scored? Oh, thank you. The person put in, there you go. So I thank you for answering that, Brayley. Thank you. Yeah, TherapeEd. Thank you for answering that. Is items weighted differently on the exam? Yes, the MBCOT weights all exam items, and they come up with a score of between 300 and 600, and 450 is passing. So if you took the SAT, I forget now what the SAT score is, but I think when I took it, it was like 1400 or 1600 for passing. So they weight the score. You didn't take 1400 items. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as the GRE. So they do weight them. All I can say about it is it's done fairly. I had a wonderful faculty member when I was teaching full-time at the University of Scranton, and he could explain statistics very, very well. I asked him to try to explain in an easy way that I could explain to students how the weighting system works. He just said it really was complicated, but just to let you guys know that it's fair. And it's a common statistical procedure. I think that's a really important thing to know about the MBCOT exam, is that it is fair. Every item that's on the MBCOT exam that counts. Remember, every item doesn't count. Same as on the GRE. The GRE, there's items that don't count because they're vetting them, they're validating them. So all items that count have been written by someone who's been trained in how to write items, has been mentored in how to write items, and their items have gone for peer review, and then it goes on the exam and doesn't even count. So you know how you get once in a while an item that annoys you or confuses you? If you get an item like that on an MBCOT exam, it's very likely it's not going to count because they make sure it's valid and it is accurately and fairly testing the content knowledge that they're intending it to test. Okay, so the exam is fair, and if there's anybody who's telling you that the new exam, is harder, more difficult, pass rates are going down, that's really not a valid claim. The MBCOT exam is the same for the code exam as it has been for many years now. The format has not changed. There's been new information added about burnout, and some of the standards have been clarified a bit, but everything that's in the fourth edition is still on the exam, and they still test this basic knowledge that I just went over. Okay. And the OT exam actually has gotten more user-friendly. It used to be that the simulation test items were all in the beginning, and you had to finish that section first, and you had to answer yes or no to everything, each option, and you couldn't change your answer. Now, the 6 option multi-select items, scenario sets, are interspersed throughout. You're going to get 6 options and 3 are correct, 3 are wrong, and you can change your answer and you could go back and review them. So if something is a little puzzling or you think you're spending too much time on something, you can mark it and go back, which is a very good thing for time management. So it's a much fairer exam. Okay. Any other general?
Hi,
Yes.
Ms. Vita, excuse me, I just have one question.
Sure.
Because I heard you just say with the 4th edition for the book, so it's okay for me to still use the OTA 4th edition book?
Yes, yes, it has all the content that's in it. And I did put if you scroll through the chat, I did put in in the chat box, my personal email. And if I haven't already sent you the handout that I did about what the difference is between the 4th and 5th, if you email me, I could send that to you. And the
Oh,
only
okay.
thing
Oh,
And the
okay.
only thing I would say is, the content outline that's in the 4th edition is from 2018. That
Mhm.
content outline has been updated to 2022, but the vast amount of content, like about environmental access, there's a couple word changes and that's about it. And the only significant new content that was added as
Was
far
the
as a major
burnout.
section is burnout. Yeah.
Okay.
And I could send that to you. And I strongly suggest you go to mbcot.org and where
Mhm.
it says what's on the exam, click on that and click on the CODA 2022 content outline. Because the one thing they did do, which is new in our book, is they gave some examples. So they'll do things like, you need to know physical agent modalities. And it'll say, for example, and it'll say
Okay.
like thermal heat. So those examples could be helpful, because they
Okay.
used to have they used to say more general statement, and then they've added some examples.
Mhm.
So that could be helpful. So I would look at the mbcot.org to see the content outline,
Okay,
because
and
that's
then
what
I'll
I
just
pulled
email
from.
you for the other stuff you said. Okay.
Yes. Yep, that would be fine.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vita.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right. If there's no other question, I'm going to stop recording. And I will hopefully see some of you in another online office hours session, and do visit and learn from the next instructor next week, next Tuesday, onto the content they will be discussing.
Rita, do you mind if I stay for a second and
Not
ask
at all.
you-
Let me just make sure I stopped recording.
Perfect. Appreciate it.